a month's hiatus, it's nice to be back in the swing of roasting the dirty/boneheaded deeds of the gaming industry. Who's on death row today? Activision! At the end of the day, their end goal is to keep their shareholders happy and content. However, their shady business deals and desire for cash cows don't really paint a happy picture for them. However, I will argue this. As scummy as they are, I think they at least deserve a not as big a jerk as you could have been award. It's not like they're EA levels of bad. E3 again! How lovely. Between poorly prepared presentations, shameless self-affirmation, and whatever the heck Bethesda land was, we always seem to find new infamously cringy or hilarious stories to tell for one of the biggest showcases in the gaming industry. So what's the worst Activision could have done?
Now I want to ask you about the name of your company, Neversoft. Is it a bunch of programmers walking around with hard?
Oh.
So, yeah, for E3 2007, Activision thought it would be fun to let comedian Jamie Kennedy host their press conference. Not a bad idea in theory, since a little celebrity endorsement never hurts.
I'd like to be able to watch this on my television while hooked into my mobile device, which is being controlled by my tablet device, which is hooked into my oven, all while sitting in the refrigerator.
As long as you know what you're getting into. But clearly, Activision didn't know what to expect because on the day of the conference, Jamie showed up completely off his rocker. He looked and sounded like he was completely drunk and spent the majority of the conference cracking really dumb, vulgar jokes, laughing at his own punchlines, and quietly berating those that didn't laugh.
Let's welcome the developer of this game from Neversoft. Wasn't that the first name for Viagra?
One part of me does want to laugh because of how cringy the whole ordeal was, but really, it's kind of uncomfortable to sit through. Seriously, look at poor Tony Hawk. He's just trying to do a straight-up interview, and we got this guy acting like a straight-up jack. And then Jamie just goes right back to making jokes that completely missed the landing zone.
So it immerses you in the skateboarding lifestyle. So does that mean you have to play it high? So if you're grabbing the way you grab your trick, it's
yeah. No, but for real, you know,
you
like
grab your trick and then
I grab the trick. Yeah.
The game is called Friend or Foe.
Yes.
Like foe what?
Faux fun.
Foe cheesy.
The worst part of this is how sometime later, Jamie was called out on Twitter for his performance at E3 2007. It was bound to happen sooner or later. One of his first responses was to lash out at users who were trying to decide who was the worst E3 host, him or Mr. Caffeine.
You know what? I'm going to link a poll in the comments section. Who's worse, Mr. Caffeine or Jamie Kennedy? I look forward to the result.
The reason this is only at number 10 is that I don't know if Activision knew this was going to happen. I mean, I don't think anyone saw this happening, but they really should have seen the red flags before greenlighting this little Hindenburg of a performance. And to be fair, it's not the most infamous thing Jamie Kennedy signed up for. Fanboy and Chum Chum was still a thing. When it comes to game series that defined a generation, nothing was closer to 90s radicalness and some early 2000s punk atmosphere than Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. By having fun and fast gameplay, a killer soundtrack, and lots of bonus skateboarding content, the series introduced the world of skateboarding in a unique and entertaining way. That was until 2007 when competition to the skateboarding game genre came along, in the form of EA's Skate. Released in 2007 alongside Tony Hawk's Pro Skater Proving Ground, Skate outsold Proving Ground on a 2-to-1 ratio. Activision took these results as a sign that the genre was dead, and had Neversoft focus more of their work on the Guitar Hero franchise and other projects. This would just begin the slow death of Neversoft, which eventually dissolved several years later. To combat their new competition, Activision had the bright idea to give the reins over to a new studio, Robomoto, whose first creation would be the abysmal garbage fire that was Tony Hawk Ride. I talked about how much of a failure this game was in my top 10 franchise killers list, so let me briefly highlight the issues. An entire game that's on rails where previous versions were open world? Ooh! Required an expensive physical peripheral, bumping the cost of the whole game up to $120? Ouch! And a game that had enough bugs and bad responses from said required peripheral that made the game nearly unplayable? Ooh! Stop it! He's already dead! What happened afterward can best be described as watching a man fall down 17 flights of stairs and then exploding when he hits the bottom. every entry from Robomoto turned into a failure, with Pro Skater HD receiving mixed reviews as the best they could do. Finally, in 2015, Robomoto will release Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5. A game so universally panned, it's honestly still an embarrassment to look at. Since then, Activision has only had one game in the series come out, a mobile game. And it's not that good either! To summarize, Activision responded to competition for their big franchise by destroying the company that made it the success it was, focused too much on gimmicks and trends, and that just gave up on quality control and caring about a finished product. This is a sad end for a franchise as unique and fun as it was. The original Modern Warfare, I have to say original now because of that stupid remake, was a hidden gem of controversy and fun gameplay, among a caveat of 12-year-old gamers and a budding fan base that we don't talk about right now. It showcased an interesting and tight story and has one of the biggest bombs to ever drop in a game. And that's coming from me of all people! Of course, with a game as popular as this, you'd expect it to get a remaster at some point, which we did. Not only did it look great, but it played great. Too bad it was attached to the Call of Duty that had one of the most disliked trailers online at the time.
That bodes well.
While you might think that bugs and lags may be the biggest issue here, they aren't. In fact, from a technical standpoint, the game is a perfect remaster in every way. It looks gorgeous, it plays well, the nuke scene is now twice as harrowing. The problem comes when Activision decided to make you pay $60 for Infinite Warfare and then another $20 for Modern Warfare. Did you want DLC with that? Well, that costs more. Yeah, the DLC for the remastered game costs additional money. Okay, so all we need is for Activision to make it standalone. Well, they did. And by doing so, doubled the price of the original game and still added DLC at a cost. In the long run, this is just a cash grab for Activision by inflating prices and making rules for acquiring the game. The fact that it's one of the best shooters of all time, even before Call of Duty's yearly releases, having to deal with this treatment is why it's here.
Too bad the biggest bomb of Activision wasn't Infinite Warfare sales. Remember when Halo was good? Or when Bungie was good?
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Back in 2007, Bungie decided they didn't want to only make Halo games anymore and wanted to split from Microsoft as a result. In 2010, they signed a deal with Activision to publish their games while Bungie develops and owns the copyright. Even at the time, going from Microsoft to Activision wasn't thought of as a very smart move, but at least Bungie kept the rights to whatever they made. Okay. When Destiny was released 4 years later as the first game of this deal, there were issues regarding a poor loot system, almost no story, and a poor character progression system. To be fair, a majority of these were due to Bungie needing to rework the entire game because they didn't like the original story that was pitched, and it took until the Taken King expansion to fix it. Then Destiny 2 came out, and Activision played a major role in its development. And boy, did it show! Microtransactions, loot boxes, and a bunch of other controversies plagued the game's first 6 months, with the game itself being a downgraded version of the first game. While there were plenty of new quality of life features, the actual gameplay still suffered from issues the vanilla first game had. And just like with Destiny 1, they fixed these issues in expansions but lost the player base at this point. With incredibly low sales, Activision cut their deal with Bungie. And to be fair, Bungie wasn't innocent in these, as the PR for the game was a bit tone deaf to what fans wanted. In the end though, Destiny was a problem child for two fighting parents that each wanted to raise it their own way. And Bungie, being the better parent, did get custody, and now Destiny 2's base game is free to play for people. However, Bungie lost this once they lost the resources used to create Destiny 2. While future games may succeed, since Bungie and Activision won't be butting heads anymore, as the champagne bottles they cracked open speak for themselves, the quality and scope of these games is still up in the air.
Well, at least Destiny did better than Anthem. Boy, these companies are similar.
I'm not sure you'll find a more dirty term in video game culture than company merger. Well, maybe microtransactions, but let's talk about the former for now. Electronic Arts is well known for buying up studios and then slowly destroying them over time. Activision is no different. However, they've gotten a pass mostly from their bad management due to the deaths being a lot slower over time. For one very specific case, let's turn to what is, or perhaps was, one of the most well-known and beloved developers, Blizzard. Now, I know Blizzard themselves have done some questionable things over the years, probably enough to earn their own list, so let's focus on what happened after their merger in 2008. In just a little over a decade since then, Activision Blizzard has lost a huge majority of the original team that helped create the powerhouse developer that solo Blizzard once was. Because of this, the level of quality usually associated with Blizzard has also been on the decline. The most recent expansion of World of Warcraft Battle for Azeroth being a good example. Along the way came the introduction of new monetization schemes in full-price games, such as Diablo 3's Marketplace, or loot boxes being in Overwatch and Heroes of the Storm, because apparently having money to spare is a huge no-no for them. And speaking of Heroes of the Storm, what about trying to push esports on every one of their titles? And when that fails, abandoning the game entirely?
No, I'm not still salty about them kicking Heroes of the Storm to the curb. What could possibly give you that idea?
On the subject of esports, Activision Blizzard pushed this angle so hard with their competitive Overwatch teams, but now investors are pulling out because, well, for one, the interest in professional esports is still rather niche in America. Oh sure, in Korea and Japan and whatnot, it's huge, but here in the States, it's not as booming as you might think. There's a whole lot of reasons why, and that could be a whole video itself, but let's focus on one. Professional sports are the way they are because a group of individuals dedicate themselves to being better than everyone else on a very specific subject. When you can master the ins and outs of a game entirely, you can take the game to the next level. But what if the game is constantly changing? Because Activision is so focused on trying to make a sport out of their games while still updating them to keep new players coming in and non-professional fans interested, they force professionals to train harder and keep up with an ever-changing game. Could you imagine what would happen to baseball if they suddenly added a fourth base or a second pitcher?
We're doomed!
This split focus and lack of understanding is what led Blizzard to be a shell of its former self, a trend-chasing company that cares more about money than putting out a good product that will sell well on its own merits. It's hard not to see why a popular TV show or video game would get so many spin-offs or sequels. It gave the developers a surprise smash, and now they want to see if they can recapture lightning in a bottle and cash in on its success. However, you try to milk it too much, and pretty much that. And yeah, needless to say, Activision is a notorious offender for the crime of milking some of its franchises to death. Among their most infamous cases was the Guitar Hero series. The first two games were published by Red Octane, and suffice to say, people were impressed. Once Activision took over the franchise's reins, their debut with the franchise seemed not too shabby with Guitar Hero 3 Legends of Rock, and it looked like the future with the franchise was bright.
But then, everything changed when oversaturation attacked.
Not even a year later, and spin-off games and sequels started getting pumped up by the dozens across any then available platform, device, and so on. How bad was it? Between 2007 and 2010, the company had ended up producing over 20 titles. 20! In a 4-year span! What really hurts is that barely any of these spin-offs did anything new or inventive, and they all just kind of blended together, pretty much making them the same game on every system. Thankfully, around 2010, the onslaught simmered slightly, and they slowed down with producing more hero games. For now, you'd think this as a sign that they learned their lesson, and
this is the song that doesn't end. Yes, it goes on and on, my friend.
That's enough, guys!
Some people started singing it, not knowing what it was, and they'll continue singing it forever just because.
We already mentioned their sin of remastering Modern Warfare twice, but Activision also seems determined to milk the Call of Duty franchise until nothing's left but powdered milk. Now, to be fair, it's nowhere near as bad as Guitar Hero mass production. Yet.
You know, so I keep saying yet and for now? It's because I have a lot of trouble believing that they'll make a responsible decision and stick to it.
However, they've been releasing at least one game a year for over the last decade, and honestly, their latest lineups have been humdrum at best, with nothing really bombastic to make them stand out above their previous titles. That's really the bigger takeaway with all these cash grabs. If they need to squeeze out more of their franchises, and apparently they must, they should at least offer something new or inventive. Otherwise, no one's really gonna care. this day and age of constant releases, companies are trying all sorts of different strategies to promote their games. Whether it be tie-in campaigns, pre-order bonuses, celebrity guest appearances, or even crossovers, there's no shortage of methods to be found. Of course, when that fails, you can always rely on controversy to sell your game. As the saying goes, there's no such thing as bad publicity. Even though Battlefront 2 and Fallout 76 are considered industry jokes by now, they still have a decent amount of people playing them. And hey, you can't deny you know about these games at the very least. Heck, if it wasn't for that graphic trailer, no one would have cared about hatred. With that said, there's an art to tastelessness. There's a tangible difference between releasing a trailer showcasing graphic violence and straw nihilism, forcing a few boomer moments and pretentious think piece videos, and tweeting a fake terror attack and sparking legitimate panic.
What? What the f?
To promote the release of Black Ops 3, the official Twitter account released several tweets describing a realistic terror attack. This had no fictional disclaimer, and the account was redesigned to look like that of an official news organization's. Needless to say, the backlash was immense. It got so bad that official news organizations talked about it, and for once they were justified in doing so.
So that being said, you might be wondering what the hypothetical terror attack had to do with Black Ops 3's story.
Nothing! Absolutely nothing!
You are scum! Friends, loved ones, dearly beloved, we are gathered here today once again to mourn those who have tragically lost their lives. While the death toll might not be as high as it was before, it is no less a grave and serious matter. I will be calling out their names to ensure that you remember them. Sierra Entertainment, Shaba Games, Luxor Flux, Red Octane, Underground Development, Budcat Creations, 7 Studios, Z2, Bizarre Creations, and finally, Radical Entertainment.
Moral of the story: if Activision or EA comes to you with a merging opportunity and you say yes,
You'll be sorry!
when it comes to crushing your wallet's windpipe through seedy means, two of the most talked about offenders are EA and Activision. EA usually gets hit by this criticism the most because, unlike them, Activision's games have a certain advantage over them, being playable. But Activision still gets its fair share of heat, and rightfully so, because they also seem determined to hit where it hurts the most.
Right in the pocketbook.
That's not what I thought you were gonna say, but that's good too.
Activision will try every sleazy trick in the book to walk away with your money. Such examples include the overpriced DLC that they'll resell to you years down the line. Looking at you again, Modern Warfare Remastered! There's also the in-game stores that are flooded with cosmetics, and yet the game maps don't seem to have the same amount of effort put into them. Priorities, Activision! And of course you have the usual loot boxes and the seasonal passes, which basically say money now, product maybe later. And some of these DLCs and microtransactions aren't optional. Oh no, Activision will insist you buy them. And they can end up nickel and diming you by making an already hefty priced game go nearly into the hundreds.
But not only that, they resort to psychological marketing. Now, that sounds weird and possibly BS, but hear me out.
In late 2017, Activision was granted a patent for a matchmaking system that would ultimately encourage microtransactions. If one of the paired players has a microtransaction, they'd be placed in a match where only they have the advantage because they shelled out the money for a certain weapon or perk. Inversely, the player without a microtransaction, probably at a huge disadvantage, would start to think the only way they stand even a lick of a chance is to completely empty their wallet for some in-game trinket. The fact that they rely on a predatory algorithm designed to help them take advantage of young gamers' inferiority complex is just despicable. In a just world, DLC, microtransactions, and other extra perks would be seen just as they are. Bonus perks, not essentials that make you feel like you can't have fun without them. And as a quick honorable mention, they ended up letting the Crash Bandicoot franchise die and didn't even try to bring it to life until fans spoke out. While they did make a comeback with Crash Team Racing, which is a fun game, they also implement something Crash didn't need: microtransactions.
Because everybody loves those, am I right?
When giant companies screw up, it isn't surprising that people will go after them with everything they got, especially if what they do is screwing over employees. You're probably not surprised to hear that Activision has been sued multiple times over the years, but some of these lawsuits bring a bigger picture to the surface of how bad Activision can be. Starting off back in 2006, a Boston law firm sued Activision over unpaid overtime for an employee who worked for them for at least 3 years. While being forced to work long work weeks is unfortunately still a major issue in the gaming industry, this employee wasn't paid any overtime because they claimed that Activision classifies their graphics employees as exempt from California overtime pay laws.
Insert artists working for exposure joke here.
In the end, that case was settled for $1.5 million. And if no employee benefits isn't fun enough for you, how about some insider trading? In 2004, Activision was accused of making high projections for its future prospects and financial position, which raised its stock. High Activision officials sold their stock at higher prices and, at the end of 2002, corrected their position, which of course was lower than what they originally said, causing the stock to fall. They made around $483 million as a result. That's not all. Earlier this year, 3 law firms sued Activision over not being transparent about the Activision-Bungie split. People who bought Activision stocks right before the split weren't informed, and then the split happened right after, despite Activision knowing it was happening since mid-2018. Dude, move! And finally, in 2012, Call of Duty creators Jason West and Vincent Pella sued Activision for wrongful termination right before they were going to get a major payout from the success of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. According to Activision, they were fired due to improper conduct and creating an environment that wasn't in line with its culture. It was rumored to be called Project Icebreaker by Activision's higher-ups. Now, it has to be said that there are also rumors that these two weren't the pinnacles of human nature either, and that the reasons cited by Activision were accurate. However, doing it right before they were supposed to get several $1 million and the full rights to Call of Duty is pretty low, especially considering what they're doing with it now. And even though they settled with losing tens of millions, it didn't matter because they still kept Call of Duty, which netted them 3 sequels, each giving them a cool billion with each one released.
Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-chingery. Money, oh money, how I love thee. Cha-ching, cha-chong, cha-changaroo. From pennies to dollars, any amount will do.
Lawsuits are a two-way thing and usually have some gray areas, but in these cases, Activision was somehow able to be sued, lose, and still get away with screwing over employees and shareholders. And because they keep making money, they don't really care about losing some along the way to fix these issues, and I think that summarizes this entire list nicely. Just a supreme lack of caring because money.
I'm the Fiery Joker, and...
Oh, the weather outside is frightful.
Wow! Snowfall's really pretty out there. And since we've no place... Next month's blizzard!
Cut!
Hey everyone, this is Josh. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and share the video around. Please check out my other social media like my Twitter, Twitch, and Tumblr. And consider checking below the video and donating to my Patreon or becoming a member, and you'll get rewards like this. Our name shoutouts today are JTC Gaming and Misty Phantom. Our full sentence shoutouts come from Buzzsaw the Righteous, who says, "Hope you all have a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and a very righteous 2020. Thanks for watching and supporting the show."